Okay, what's your question?
Why did you say that the civil rights bill should be overturned?
I didn't say that. I said it was a mistake.
Why? That's crazy.
Now you gotta figure it out.
I wouldn't be here. That's trouble.
Who's that? Who's that?
Good evening, gentlemen, and a few of you ladies that may be listening. This is Spiritual Art of War, back at it again with another episode. And this time we're going to talk about the Charlie Kirk situation. I'm not going to get too deep because I'm on my way back to my residence. But what I wanted to talk about was just how many people are trying to cape for this man. This man was saying things that were only inciting the kind of rhetoric that will lead to race wars, which ultimately is going to eventually happen. It's going to happen anyway. But he was part of the fueling of that. Okay, and instead of him to attack those that control the levers of power that are not black, because that's who he liked to focus in on. He would attack alternative lifestyles, which was brought in by his people. Okay, it was his people that brought him in, and they also are the ones that control industries. They control the banking system. They control the bureaucracy. They control politics, the parties. Even when they have non-white people in their parties, they have to be vetted by the whites that control both parties. Okay, this is nothing but Rome all over again, with the same two-party system. Okay? And the plebeians versus the patricians. That's all it is. And there's actually some overlap when it comes to this, because you have like legacy Democrats that have been around for 50 years, like Biden, who back then, people understand, a lot of Democrats were more conservative. In fact, both political parties, when you go back into the 1950s and 60s, they were very conservative in the way that they approach things. Okay? Like, this idea that the Democrats of today were the Democrats of yesterday is crazy. Just look up Lyndon B. Johnson and what his quotes about black people. Okay? Even what's her name's wife, JFK's wife, called Martin Luther King a bad person. And these are Democrats we're talking about. So this whole idea that it's just this liberal left versus right, it's not, because look at the threats that have been made to HBCUs. You got a bunch of predominantly white colleges and universities that are heavily liberal. In fact, that's where a lot of the intellectual stuff comes out of, all these liberal white universities. Okay? The idea of like multiple genders and, alternative lifestyles, those ideas is being funded by white liberals. But you're not threatening those universities. You didn't threaten Harvard and Yale and Princeton. You didn't threaten Berkeley. Why isn't Berkeley threatened? I'm pretty sure a lot of those people on the Berkeley campus weren't fans of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk would have been a problem for him to even go to Berkeley. But there was no threat on Berkeley. UC Berkeley. There was no threat on UCLA. There was no threat on University of Oregon or University of Washington. These are predominantly white universities with major influence, but they're not threatened. It was only HBCUs that were threatened. They had to shut down. Some of them are going to shut down for the rest of the week. They're down today and tomorrow, and of course the weekend. And see if they'll be coming back to classes on Monday. But it was a so-called white man that did the shooting. Okay, his pictures is out there and everything in the middle of Utah, where there's like less than, I would be shocked if even up to 1% of the population of Utah is black. Like, I'm pretty sure it's got to be below that. Like, maybe when you get to Salt Lake City, it might be maybe 2 to 3% black, maybe. And I'm just guessing. I haven't even done the research. I can look it up later. But this happened in Utah, man. I think Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Bro, like, the only black people they probably got there are athletes on scholarship, bro. Like, but yeah, who is a political scapegoat? Black people. But you clowns like Anton Daniels, man, this is why As much as he says he's a Christian, yeah, you are a Christian. You fall into the same lane as white Christians, just like Charlie Kirk. That's why you like Charlie Kirk. You like Charlie Kirk because you're just like him. You believe in the same white Jesus, which is basically the image of white supremacy on the planet. That's why you're sitting around making all these things about, people celebrating. I'm not one to be going out here celebrating people's deaths, but people have their reasons, okay? Now, some of them, they're going to deal with the consequences of being overt with it. If they work somewhere or whatever, some of them are going to lose friends as well, or people that they didn't know were supporters of Charlie Kirk, or maybe some people that may think it's distasteful. I mean, it's not like white people didn't celebrate the death of Martin Luther King. They even try to hide that stuff when it comes to historical knowledge of the Martin Luther King aftermath. All they talk about was the riots that occurred. But I've seen actual people that were in high school during that time in Central Little Rock that actually were, that told about the aftermath of that situation and how the white kids, students at the school, were happy and were teasing them and were bullying them with the death of Martin Luther King. This is one of the reasons why it's dangerous to even be viewed as a black leader. Because if you're designated a black leader, you're either co-opted, you're going to be used to the benefit of whatever oppositional side that wants to control you, on whether it's right wing or left wing, or if you're not under any control and you rise up to a point where you're respected and known and people are listening to you, you'll be taken out or you'll be defamed. Okay? So that's why it's dangerous, especially in the Western world where they're trying to maintain, white supremacy. I mean, people hate the saying of that, but it's very clear that when you listen to me, he has so many sound bites, bro. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure y'all seen it. I had to put the clip up in the beginning with that young black kid asking about the civil rights. He was like, you bet. He didn't give a damn about that young kid. Remember, this is a guy that says that empathy is empathy is a woke agenda, like feeling sorry for other people of their condition. You know why he says that? Because he doesn't care about those that are oppressed. He wants to maintain a position of being an oppressor. And the fact is, a lot of people have a hard time people have a hard time, excuse me on that, people have a hard time paying attention to what's really going on. Because they see the news, they see the video, and they don't understand, like, why would this guy be targeted by anybody? But the thing about it, his rhetoric was going to lead to some enemies, and eventually, someone having that big of a platform, millions of subscribers, famous, not famous in terms of like how people think famous is. Because what happens is when these guys rise to prominence in social media, they eventually get fully co-opted. That's what happened with Charlie Kirk. Eventually, from high school, you have like old tweets from his rhetoric back in 2011. And he starts getting the following. Before you know it, he's going to be able to be in a position where he'll get that call. He'll get that hit up by people that are very influential. And J.D. Vance, the likes of J.D. Vance and Trump and a lot of those people on the right, the Republican Party, the MAGA folks, they used him to galvanize a lot of that young voting bloc. And they were successful. Okay, and you see that Trump got reelected. And, they were going around trying to push that they were going to reform America back to a greater time which none of these people, I've already told you what time in America do they want to go back to. If they can choose a time machine and everybody will go back to the condition that they were in, the position they were socially in America, what would that time period be? They don't want it to tell you that it's prior to the civil rights era, because that's the time that they want. They really want to go back to those Lever to Beaver age. They want to go back to the time when they can openly disenfranchise people, openly mistreat people. That's why even sometimes when you watch these documentaries of back in those times, of that era and through the 1960s, you have to really put things into context of like how much oppression openly was happening and covertly was happening to black people. You know, a lot of people look at that stuff in a vacuum, like, oh, look at these people, they're just poor for nothing. Oh, they don't know how to take care of themselves and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, no, you're not looking at the full story. Okay, these people fleeing from sharecropping, some of them being killed, raped, maimed, all kind of stuff, fleeing to other cities for opportunities and then being discriminated against again, and then being disenfranchised through all kind of policies, right, that were later deemed illegal because of the civil rights movement. But the damage is already done, multi-generational. And then he keeps on saying, oh, well, why are blacks so violent? Oh, why are blacks so violent? Like, this is a guy born in 1993. Like, dude, you wouldn't even be able to, this is a person that won't even look back into what happened prior to his time of being born. He don't know about the Reaganomics and the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the Vietnam, the bringing in of heroin and all that stuff. They don't know. They don't care about that stuff. Feminism, okay, no-fault divorce, all this stuff influenced the downfall of black society, okay? Or made it worse. Whatever conditions our people had at the time was made worse by those policies later. And that's really the best way to put it. But, I don't give a fud about no damn Charlie Kirk, okay? A lot of his people is butthurt and upset, but they still defending all the rhetoric that he had, his anti-black rhetoric. You know what I'm saying? So that's just what it is with Charlie Kirk, man. I didn't shed not one tear. I ain't praying for his wife and his kids. So let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. I'll catch you in the next episode.